The day I found my son and granddaughter living under a bridge in San Diego, something inside me shattered. I had believed Daniel was halfway across the world, building a new life in Australia with his wife Vanessa. That's what she told me 3 years ago, after their brutal argument that tore our family apart. But as I looked at that little girl sitting barefoot on the cold concrete, clutching a ragged doll, I realized I was staring into the eyes of my granddaughter, Emily. I don't know, but the hurt in his eyes told me he didn't believe me. He set his cup down and stood. Vanessa's right. You always have something to say. You always think you know best. Daniel, please. No, Mom. His voice broke. I love you, but I can't keep living between you two. Before I could speak again, Vanessa came down the stairs carrying Emily, now half asleep on her shoulder. Her face was pale but composed. Are we leaving, honey? She asked softly, as if nothing had happened. Every instinct in me screamed to drive there, to confront her, to scream until she finally broke. But anger alone wouldn't finish this. Vanessa thrived on chaos, on reaction. If I wanted to truly destroy her, I had to be smarter. That evening, I met with Sarah. She listened carefully as I explained the break-in, her brow furrowing deeper with every word. Margaret, this isn't just harassment anymore, she said. It's criminal intimidation. And if we can prove she violated the restraining order, she's going to jail. Then let's make sure we can prove it, I said coldly. Sarah's eyes glinted. What do you have in mind? The plan came together over the next few days. With Mr. Thompson's help, we set up hidden cameras in the bakery and outside the house. Daniel installed motion sensors and security alarms. Then we waited. For 2 nights, nothing happened. But on the 3rd night, at 2:14 a.m., the alarm went off. I woke instantly. The motion sensor near the bakery door had triggered. Through the monitor beside my bed, I saw her Vanessa slipping through the back door, flashlight in hand, her movements graceful, careful. She didn't know she was being recorded from 3 different angles. Daniel rushed down the hall. Mom, what do we do? Stay here, I said, grabbing the phone. Call the police. I'll handle her. I walked downstairs quietly, my heart steady. The years had taught me how to face storms. When I reached the bakery's back room, I flicked on the lights. Vanessa froze, caught mid-step. For a split second, the mask of arrogance slipped, and then she smiled. Well, she said, lowering the flashlight. You always were an early riser. I folded my arms. You're trespassing. She shrugged. I just came to talk. But it looks like you've been expecting me. Her eyes flicked toward the camera in the corner. Always paranoid, Margaret. Smart, I corrected. Her smile turned venomous. You think you've won because of that courtroom stunt? The public may have forgotten, but I haven't. You took my family, my reputation. You destroyed those yourself, I interrupted. You abandoned your child. You stole from my son. You tried to ruin us. You don't get to play the victim now. Her face twisted, fury flashing in her eyes. You think Daniel's so innocent? He's weak, pathetic. I made him who he was. N.R. No, I said, my voice cold and low. You broke him. And I rebuilt him. For the first time, she faltered. Her breath came faster. You think you're some kind of savior? You're just a lonely old woman clinging to what's left of your control. Maybe, I said quietly. But at least I still have something left to lose. You don't. She took a step forward. You'll regret crossing me. I already did, I said. 3 years ago. The sirens wailed outside before she could answer. Her eyes darted to the window, panic flashing across her face. You called the police? No, I said, almost smiling. My son did. Within moments, red and blue lights filled the street. Officers burst through the front door. Vanessa tried to bolt toward the alley, but 2 of them caught her before she made it out. Miss Reed, one of them said, reading from a note. You are under arrest for trespassing, property damage, and violation of a court restraining order. She screamed, thrashing as they cuffed her. You can't do this to me. I'm Emily's mother. You hear me? I stood there, arms folded, unmoving. Not anymore, I said softly. They dragged her out. The bakery lights flickered against the polished glass as the squad car drove away. For a long moment, I stood alone in the silence, the faint smell of sugar and flour mingling with the cold night air. And then, for the first time in years, I let myself breathe. The trial that followed was short. With video footage, fingerprints, and multiple witness statements, Vanessa's guilt was undeniable. She was sentenced to 18 months in prison for harassment, fraud, and violation of court orders. When the judge read the verdict, she didn't look at me. Not once. But I watched her. Watched the fury drain from her face, replaced by something hollow, frightened, small. Afterward, Daniel hugged me tightly outside the courthouse. "It's finally over," he whispered. I nodded, my voice trembling. Yes, it's over. But inside, I knew it wasn't just the end of her story. It was the end of the woman I used to be, the one who stayed quiet, who forgave too easily, who let guilt silence her instincts. That night, when I came home, Emily was waiting for me on the porch, her little arms wrapped around her favorite doll. "Grandma," she said softly, "Daddy said the bad lady won't come back anymore." Daniel nodded. "Yeah, we're done here." The room spun. "Done?" I whispered. He didn't answer. He just picked up the diaper bag and car keys. I stood frozen, watching as Vanessa avoided my eyes, heading toward the door. "Daniel, please don't do this," I begged, my voice trembling. "Don't leave like this." He turned once, his jaw clenched. "Maybe some distance will help, Mom. Vanessa and I need peace." The door shut behind them. The echo rang through the house like a gunshot. End de four. I knelt down, smiling through tears. "No, sweetheart, she won't." She tilted her head. "Does that mean we can be happy now?" I brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Yes," I whispered. "Now we can be happy." Daniel stood behind us, his hands in his pockets, watching. The sunset painted his face gold, and for the first time in years, I saw peace in his eyes. We went inside, the three of us, as the scent of freshly baked cookies filled the air again. Sweet Haven's sign glowed warm against the darkening sky. Sometimes life doesn't give you justice. You have to bake it yourself slowly, patiently, until the heat burns away the bitterness. And when it finally cools, it tastes like freedom. People often ask me if I regretted taking Vanessa to court, exposing her lies, letting her fall as hard as she once made us fall. And my answer is always the same. No. Because sometimes revenge isn't about hatred. It's about restoration, about reclaiming the truth that someone tried to bury. For years, I thought strength meant silence, that if I just endured, time would fix everything. But life taught me something different. Silence only feeds cruelty. The moment I decided to stand up, everything changed, not because I won, but because I finally refused to lose myself. When Vanessa went to prison, I didn't feel joy. Not really. What I felt was peace, the quiet kind that settles in your bones when justice finally breathes again. And in that peace, I found forgiveness. Not for her, but for myself. For the years I spent doubting, blaming, waiting, Daniel rebuilt Sweet Haven from the ground up. He's stronger now, steady, kind, a father who reads bedtime stories every night without fail. Emily's laughter fills the house like music. She still draws pictures of us, Grandma, Daddy, and her, holding hands in front of the bakery. Every time I look at those drawings, I'm reminded that love is the only legacy that matters. Sometimes, when I stand by the window at dusk, I think of the bridge where I found them, the wind, the cold, the brokenness. That place no longer haunts me. It reminds me how far we've come. Life has a strange way of testing us. It takes us to the edge, strips away everything we think we need, and whispers, "Now, show me who you are." And when you rise from that edge, not perfect, not unscarred, but standing, that's when you finally know your worth. So if you're listening to this story tonight, wondering if it's too late to fight for yourself, or too late to forgive, remember this. It's never too late to begin again. Sometimes healing begins the moment you decide you deserve peace more than you crave revenge. And if this story touched your heart, if you believe in love that endures and justice that takes its time, stay with us for the next story. Because life doesn't end with pain. It begins again with strength. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table until dawn, staring at the cold pie that no one had eaten. I replayed every word, every look, searching for the moment things went wrong. How could love turn into this? Days passed. I called Daniel, but he didn't answer. I sent messages, left voicemails, nothing. Weeks turned into months. My home grew quieter than I ever imagined possible. Then one evening, about 6 months later, a message appeared on my phone from Vanessa. My heart pounded as I opened it. "Please stop contacting Daniel. We've decided to move on. We're starting a new life in Australia. Don't try to reach us again." The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. Australia. As far away as they could go. For years I lived with that silence. Every birthday, every Christmas, I'd set an extra plate just in case they came home. But they never did. I tried to forgive Vanessa for my son's sake. But in the quiet of those endless nights, anger would creep back in like a shadow. There were moments I blamed myself too. Maybe I had spoken out of turn. Maybe my love had been too strong, too controlling. 3 years later, when the loneliness became unbearable, I decided to take a short trip to San Diego, a little vacation to clear my mind. I told myself it was time to let go, to make peace with what couldn't be changed. The hotel I checked into was small but cozy, with a tiny balcony overlooking a crowded street full of tourists and musicians. I remember standing there, watching strangers laugh and dance, and wondering how many of them were pretending to be okay just like me. I spent my days walking through plazas, feeding pigeons, and writing in my journal. For the first time in years, I felt almost free from the weight on my chest, until that afternoon when I saw her. A small girl, barefoot and shivering, sitting behind a fountain, clutching a torn doll to her chest. She looked hungry, lost, and yet strangely familiar. Something about the way she held that doll, the protectiveness, the quiet sadness sent a chill through me. A couple nearby dropped part of their sandwich. The girl hesitated, eyes darting nervously before crawling forward to pick it up. She brushed the dirt off and tucked it carefully into her pocket. That simple act pierced through me like a knife. Without thinking, I ran to the nearest cafe and bought a warm croissant and a carton of milk. When I approached her, she flinched, her big hazel eyes wide with fear. "It's okay, sweetheart," I said softly, kneeling down. "You must be hungry." She stared at the food, then at me. I pushed the bag toward her, and in that moment when our eyes met, I stopped breathing. On her right eyelid, just beneath the crease, was a tiny mole, the exact same one Daniel had since he was born. My hands began to tremble. "No," I whispered. "It can't be." She took the bag, and her small, cold fingers brushed mine. Then she looked up at me and said in a trembling voice, "Grandma, is that really you?" The world spun. My throat closed. I stood abruptly, backing away. "You're mistaken, sweetheart. My granddaughter lives in Australia." Her eyes filled with tears. "Please don't go, Grandma." But I couldn't breathe. I turned and walked away, my heart pounding in my ears. Yet the sound of her voice followed me soft, desperate, calling out behind me. "Grandma, please, don't leave me." I stopped at the corner, frozen in place. When I turned back, she was running toward me, clutching that doll, her little sandals slapping the pavement. She grabbed the edge of my coat, her small hand trembling. "If you don't believe me," she whispered through tears, "I'll take you to Daddy. You'll see." And the woman who'd taken everything from them was living her dream life overseas. I still remember the last Saturday that felt normal. The sun poured through my kitchen windows, warming the small house in Pasadena that had once been filled with laughter. The smell of cinnamon and roasted chicken drifted through the air as I stirred the pot on the stove, humming an old country tune. Alber. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't walk away, not again. Emily's tiny hand gripped mine tightly as we walked away from the busy plaza. Her fingers were ice-cold, fragile like bird bones, and she trembled every few steps, but her pace quickened as though she feared I might change my mind. The sound of street musicians and laughter faded behind us, replaced by the low hum of traffic and the distant cry of gulls circling above. "Where are we going, sweetheart?" I asked softly, trying to keep my voice steady. "You'll see," she whispered. "Daddy's there." We crossed a cracked sidewalk lined with graffiti and broken bottles. The smell of salt and exhaust filled the air. San Diego's sunshine still glowed above, but as we turned down a narrow dirt path behind a row of warehouses, the light seemed to dim. We were leaving the part of the city tourists never saw. Emily led me under an overpass, where the sound of cars thundered overhead like a heartbeat in the sky. The air turned damp and heavy. The ground was littered with old newspapers, plastic bottles, and flattened cardboard boxes that people had turned into beds. My stomach twisted. This couldn't be real. The little girl's pace slowed. "Daddy?" she called softly. Her voice echoed beneath the concrete ceiling. A man's figure stirred near the far wall, among the shadows. He was kneeling, sorting through a pile of cans and bottles, stuffing them into a torn trash bag. When he turned, my breath caught. The man's face was sunburned, his beard thick and uneven. His clothes hung loosely from a body too thin, too tired. But his eyes, oh, those eyes were unmistakable. Daniel? I whispered. He froze, his entire body stiffening like a cornered animal. Then, almost instinctively, he pushed Emily behind him. We don't have anything to give you, he said hoarsely. Please, just go. His voice. My knees went weak. Daniel, it's me. He looked up again, confusion flickering in his eyes, followed by disbelief. I saw recognition dawn like a painful sunrise. He dropped the bag he was holding, cans spilling and rolling across the dirt. Mum? His voice cracked. I wanted to run to him, to hold him like when he was a little boy who scraped his knee and cried on my shoulder. But I froze. My son, my beautiful, proud, stubborn Daniel, was standing before me, broken and hollow. The last 3 years had carved deep lines into his face, stealing the light that once lived there. I took a step forward, tears blurring my vision. Daniel, what happened to you? My God, what happened? He backed away, shaking his head. You shouldn't be here. Emily clung to his leg, whispering, Daddy, it's Grandma. She came back. That single word, Grandma, seemed to slice through the air. Daniel's shoulders slumped. He closed his eyes and sank down to the cold ground. I'm sorry, he murmured, voice breaking. It's all my fault. I knelt beside him, ignoring the dampness soaking through my jeans. I reached for his face, cupping his cheek with a trembling hand. No, Daniel, you don't have to apologize. Just tell me what happened. For a long moment, he said nothing. The sound of traffic rumbled overhead, like the world moving on without us. Emily sat beside him, clutching her doll, watching us both with wide, frightened eyes. Finally, Daniel spoke. His voice was barely a whisper. After we left your house, Vanessa told me she wanted to start over. She said she had a friend in Australia who could get us jobs, help us build a new life. I thought she was trying to fix things. He laughed bitterly. She said she needed my help with the paperwork, visa forms, proof of income. I signed whatever she gave me. I didn't even read it. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Daniel, what did you sign? I didn't know at the time, he said, staring at the ground. Turns out I gave her power of attorney. She moved everything, our savings, the car, even the house, into her name. She said it was temporary, that it'd make the visa process faster. My chest tightened. And then? Daniel swallowed hard. A week before the flight, she filed for divorce. Said I'd been abusive. Said I hit her and scared Emily. Ugh, I gasped. That's a lie. You'd never... He shook his head quickly. I know, Mom. But I had no lawyer, no money. Everything was in her name. I thought it was just a misunderstanding. Then the judge granted her everything. The house, the bank accounts, even custody of Emily. He looked up at me, eyes glistening. She took everything, Mom. Everything except our dignity, and even that didn't last long. I couldn't speak. My throat burned, my hands trembling in my lap. It had been weeks since Daniel and Vanessa had come to visit, and I wanted everything to be perfect. Emily loved my homemade biscuits, and Daniel had always been crazy about my chicken pot pie since he was a boy. The table was already set, polished silverware gleaming in the afternoon light. I even brought out the floral tablecloth I used only for family dinners. I told myself this was the day things might finally start feeling normal again. Maybe the tension between Vanessa and me would ease. The day we were supposed to leave for Australia, he continued, she told me to wait with Emily at the terminal while she checked in our luggage. She took all the tickets, all the passports, the money, said she'd be right back. He paused, voice breaking. She never came back. When I asked the airline staff, they said she'd already boarded and the plane had taken off. I stood there holding Emily's hand, watching people board other flights, waiting for a woman who had stolen our lives. My tears finally spilled over. I reached for Emily, pulling her into my arms. You poor baby. Daniel looked away, shame twisting his face. We slept in the terminal for 2 nights. Then we were told to leave. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have an ID anymore, couldn't get a job. Emily was hungry. I begged for work, but no one would hire me. Eventually, we ended up here. Under a bridge, I whispered. The words tasted like poison. He nodded. It's safer than the streets. Some nights, when it rains, I hold Emily and pretend the sound of cars above us is just thunder. She sleeps better that way. Emily leaned her head on his shoulder, clutching her doll. Daddy tells me stories, she said quietly. About when you used to make cookies, Grandma. He said they smelled like Christmas. My vision blurred again. The world around me seemed to tilt. "I should have found you sooner," I whispered. "I should have known." Daniel shook his head. "No, it's my fault. I said things I can never take back. I told you I didn't need you, that I'd rather starve than come home, and I meant it at the time." "Daniel," I said softly, "you were angry. You were misled. That's not the same as meaning it." He looked at me for a long moment, and then his face crumpled. Tears ran freely down his cheeks. "I failed you, Mom. I failed Emily. I'm sorry." I took his hands in mine, rough, calloused, scarred, and squeezed them tight. "Listen to me," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "You're still my son. You're still her father. And as long as I'm alive, you're not alone anymore." For the first time, he didn't argue. He just leaned forward and let me hold him, his head resting against my shoulder. The smell of sweat and smoke clung to him, but I didn't care. I had my son back. When the tears finally stopped, I wiped Emily's face and said, "We're going home." Daniel blinked. "What? No, Mom, I can't." "Yes, you can," I interrupted. "You and Emily are coming home with me. No more cardboard beds, no more skipping meals, no more hiding." He hesitated, looking at the makeshift shelter he'd built: a few boxes, a blanket, a tin can with melted wax. The shame in his eyes broke my heart all over again. "I can't go back after everything I said to you," he murmured. "I don't deserve your help." I took his face in both hands, forcing him to meet my gaze. "You're my son, Daniel Parker. That will never change. You think I care about what you said? You were hurting, and I forgave you the moment you walked out that door 3 years ago." His lip quivered. "But, no buts," I said firmly. "You and Emily are coming home." He swallowed hard, then finally nodded. We gathered what little he had: 2 trash bags, a threadbare blanket, and a doll missing an arm. Emily clung to my waist, smiling faintly for the first time. I held her close as we climbed the hill back toward the main road. The sunset had turned the sky a bruised shade of purple, and for the first time in years, I felt a strange flicker of peace. At the bus station, I bought 3 tickets to Pasadena. Daniel tried to protest when he saw me pay, but I shot him a look that silenced him immediately. On the ride home, Emily fell asleep on my lap, her small hand gripping my fingers even in her dreams. Daniel sat beside the window, watching the highway lights flash by. His reflection in the glass looked haunted, but softer somehow, as if he was starting to believe this nightmare might finally end. Halfway through the trip, he spoke quietly. "Mom, what if she comes back? What if Vanessa tries to take Emily again?" I turned to him, my voice calm but steely. "Then she'll regret ever stepping foot near my family again." He didn't reply, but I saw the faintest trace of a smile. For the first time since I'd found him, Daniel looked like my son again. Outside, the lights of Pasadena began to glow in the distance. Home. When we finally arrived in Pasadena, the sky was just beginning to lighten, the horizon washed in pale orange. The familiar scent of morning dew and blooming jasmine filled the air as we stepped off the bus. For a moment, I simply stood there, staring at my small white house at the end of the block, the same house Daniel had left 3 years ago. I knew she thought I meddled too much, that I was old-fashioned, but all I ever wanted was to help. At exactly 6 o'clock, I heard the car pull into the driveway. My heart skipped a beat. I wiped my hands on my apron and hurried to the door. Daniel came in first, tall and broad-shouldered, with the same gentle eyes he'd had since he was a boy. But behind him, Vanessa followed, clutching Emily's hand tightly as if shielding her from me. He hesitated at the gate, his shoulders hunched, eyes full of guilt. Emily clung to his hand, gazing up at him uncertainly. "It's all right," I said gently. "This house has been waiting for you." He didn't move, so I walked ahead, unlocking the gate and holding the door open. "Come in, Daniel," I said quietly. "You and Emily are home now." N.E.T. Inside, everything was just as I had kept it. The polished wooden floors, the faint aroma of cinnamon from the bakery room in the back, and the framed photos of Daniel as a little boy smiling beside his father. The house had been silent for too long, but as Emily stepped through the doorway, her soft footsteps brought it back to life. "Grandma," she whispered, looking around with wide eyes. "It's so warm here." I smiled through tears. "It's been cold for too long, sweetheart." Ow. I drew a bath for her first. When the warm water filled the small bathroom, steam rose like a curtain. I helped her out of her threadbare clothes, each piece so tiny and worn that my chest ached just touching them. Her little body was covered in faint bruises, marks not from violence but from hardship, from hunger and cold. As I gently washed her hair, she sighed with relief. "It feels like heaven, Grandma." I smiled, blinking back tears. "From now on, you'll have warm baths every day, my angel." When she was clean, I dressed her in a soft pink dress I'd bought years ago, back when I still hoped they might come home someday. It fit her perfectly. She looked like the child she was meant to be, innocent, cherished, safe. Daniel bathed next. When he came out of the bathroom, freshly shaven, wearing a clean shirt that had once belonged to his late father, I almost didn't recognize him. The man who had lived under that bridge was gone. Standing before me now was my son, worn, yes, but alive. He gave a small, uncertain smile. "Do I look presentable?" "You look like Daniel Parker again," I said softly. That evening, I made a pot of chicken soup and cornbread. The smell filled the house with memories. We sat at the table, the three of us, and for the first time in years, I heard the sound of family again. Emily's laughter, Daniel's quiet voice, the clinking of spoons against bowls. When Emily finished her second helping, she leaned back with a satisfied sigh. "Grandma, your cooking is way better than the sandwiches Daddy finds." Daniel laughed under his breath, a sound so rare it startled me. He looked down at her lovingly. "You hear that, Mom? I've been officially replaced." And from Eddie, for a fleeting moment, everything felt right. In the days that followed, Daniel tried to repay me the only way he knew how, by working. I still ran the small bakery behind the house. Sweet Haven, the little shop that had kept our family afloat since my husband's days. Daniel swept floors, carried flour sacks, repaired broken shelves, anything to feel useful. "Daniel," I told him one morning as he scrubbed a counter that was already spotless, "you don't need to do all this." "Oh," he shook his head, not looking at me. "I have to. You've done too much already." But I saw something else in his eyes, shame, and a desperate need to rebuild his worth. So I let him work, because I knew he wasn't just repairing the shop, he was rebuilding himself. Emily quickly became the heart of the house. Every afternoon after school, she'd come running through the bakery door, her backpack bouncing, breathless with excitement. "Grandma, look what I drew today," she'd say, holding up a crayon sketch of cookies, cupcakes, and smiling faces. I'd hang them proudly on the wall behind the counter. The customers loved her. She had that Parker warmth, bright, pure, and irresistible. The bakery began to come alive again. With Daniel's help, I updated our packaging, created new labels, and even took his suggestion to start online orders. He spent long nights teaching himself how to design a simple website. "People buy everything online now, Mom," he said, tapping at the keyboard. "We can reach customers beyond Pasadena, maybe all of California." I looked at him and smiled. The light in his eyes was returning. "You always did dream big." Weeks turned into months, and little by little, Sweet Haven began to thrive. Orders came in from nearby towns. People loved our old-fashioned recipes and the warmth that came with every box. She wore a crisp white dress, perfectly ironed, her long blonde hair cascading down her shoulders like she'd stepped out of a commercial. Her perfume, sharp and expensive, filled the room before she even spoke. "Hi, Mom," Daniel said, forcing a smile. His voice sounded strained. "Smells great in here." "Welcome home, sweetheart," I replied, wrapping him in a hug before he could step back. "And you, little one, come to Grandma." Emily peeked at me shyly from behind Vanessa's leg. Daniel managed the logistics. Emily helped pack cookies on weekends, and I baked until my arms ached, but my heart was full. Sometimes, I'd catch Daniel staring out the bakery window at sunset. His expression would grow distant, haunted. I knew he was thinking of Vanessa, of the betrayal that had burned his life to ashes. One evening, I found him sitting alone in the dim light, an untouched mug of coffee beside him. "She's still out there," he said quietly, living comfortably, probably laughing at us. I sat across from him. "Let her laugh. You're here, with your daughter, starting over. That's more than she'll ever have." He looked down. "I just don't understand how someone could be that cruel." "Because she mistook greed for happiness," I said. "And people like that always destroy themselves in the end." He smiled faintly. "You really believe that?" "I don't have to," I replied. "I've lived long enough to see it happen." We didn't speak of Vanessa again, but her shadow never truly left us. Then, one sunny afternoon, Nearly 6 months after Daniel and Emily had moved back home, the shadow stepped back into the light. The bakery was full of customers that day, children pointing at jars of lemon drops, couples laughing over chocolate fudge samples. The hum of the oven, the bell above the door, the smell of caramel, it all felt alive, safe, until the door opened again, and everything inside me went cold. A woman stepped in, wearing oversized sunglasses and a tailored cream dress that screamed money. Her heels clicked sharply against the floor. Daniel, who had been helping a customer, froze mid-sentence. I knew that posture instantly, even after 3 years. The tilt of her chin, the way she surveyed the room as if she owned it. Vanessa Reed. For a heartbeat, the world went silent. Emily, sitting on a stool behind the counter drawing on a napkin, looked up. Her eyes widened. "Mommy?" she whispered, uncertainly. Daniel dropped the pastry box he was holding. It hit the floor with a dull thud. Vanessa removed her sunglasses slowly, revealing that same flawless face, only now framed by coldness. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Hello, Daniel," she said softly, like they were meeting at a brunch instead of a battlefield. Her gaze slid to me. "And Mrs. Parker, you're looking older." "Get out," I said immediately. My voice was calm, but every muscle in my body was tense. Customers glanced at us uneasily. Daniel stepped forward, placing himself between Vanessa and Emily. "What do you want?" His tone was sharp, unfamiliar. Vanessa sighed dramatically. "I came to see my daughter. It's been years." "You mean the daughter you abandoned in an airport?" I said icily. Her smile faltered, just for a moment. "I made mistakes, but I'm here to make things right. Emily deserves a real family." End of Real family? I repeated, laughing bitterly. "You left her to starve while you enjoyed your life in Australia. You forfeited that word the day you boarded that plane." The color rose in her cheeks. "You don't understand. Things were complicated." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I snapped. "You stole everything from my son. You left them to die." The room was dead quiet. Even the ovens seemed to hold their breath. Vanessa's expression hardened. "If you're done playing saint, Mrs. Parker, you should know I've already spoken to a lawyer. I'm filing for custody of Emily. She's my daughter, and I have every right to be in her life." Daniel's voice broke through the silence, low and trembling with fury. "You have no right to anything." But Vanessa wasn't finished. Her gaze flicked to the crowded bakery, the logo on the wall, the shelves lined with our products. "And as for this lovely little business, remember, we were married when it started. Technically, I'm entitled to half." I could feel my pulse pounding in my temples. "You greedy, heartless woman," I hissed. She smirked, sliding her sunglasses back on. "You'll be hearing from my attorney." And with that, she turned on her heel and walked out, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than any storm. Daniel stood motionless, fists clenched, chest heaving. Emily, confused and frightened, crawled into my arms. "Grandma," she whispered, "is Mommy taking me away?" I kissed the top of her head. "Over my dead body," I said softly. Through the bakery window, I watched Vanessa's car pull away, her reflection disappearing into the California sunlight. But I knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of a new war, one I was finally ready to fight. For a few days after Vanessa's visit, the house felt different, quieter, heavier. She was 4 then, tiny, with big hazel eyes and soft curls that reminded me so much of Daniel when he was little. I bent down, smiling. "I baked your favorite cookies." Her lips twitched, but before she could run to me, Vanessa's hand tightened around her arm. "Say hello first, Emily," she said sweetly but firmly. Emily whispered, "Hi, Grandma," and my heart melted. We sat down to eat, but the air was thick. Vanessa smiled politely, though her eyes rarely met mine. Even the sweet smell of vanilla from the bakery couldn't mask the tension that had settled in the air. Daniel barely spoke. He spent hours in the garage, fixing things that weren't broken, while I caught myself checking the windows at night, half expecting to see that woman's car parked outside. Emily sensed it too. She'd wake in the middle of the night, climb into my bed and whisper, "Grandma, Mommy's not coming back, right?" I'd hold her close, stroke her hair and whisper, "No, baby, she's gone for good." But in my heart, I wasn't sure. A week later, the storm hit. It started with a single review online. Someone had posted on our bakery's page, "Warning, my son got sick after eating Sweet Haven cookies. They use expired ingredients. Don't risk it." At first, I brushed it off. Every business got a bad review now and then. But by the next day, there were dozens more. All from strange accounts with no photos, no names. My daughter threw up all night after eating their fudge. Their packaging is unsanitary. They mix expired flour with chemicals. By the end of the week, a local food blog picked up the story. Sweet Haven Bakery under investigation for health violations. I nearly dropped my coffee when I saw the headline. It wasn't true there had never been an inspection. No complaints from real customers. But the damage was already done. Within hours, the phone began ringing non-stop. Some people demanded refunds. Others screamed at me, calling me a liar, a poisoner. A few even threatened to report us to the city. "Mom, maybe we should just close for a few days," Daniel said, rubbing his temples. His eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep. "Close?" I repeated. "That's exactly what she wants." He looked at me, confusion flickering across his face. "You think Vanessa's behind this?" I stared at the article on my phone, reading the lines over and over. The timing, the tone, the fake outrage, it all smelled of her. "I don't think," I said quietly. "I know." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Then she's not just after custody, she's trying to destroy us." The following days were chaos. Customers stopped coming. Our supplier, nervous about the rumors, delayed deliveries. Even the schools stopped ordering our cookies for fundraisers. One evening, as I was closing the bakery, I found 3 rotten eggs smashed across the front door. The stench was unbearable. Someone had scrawled in red paint across the window. "Poison family." I sank to my knees, my hands shaking. The sight felt like a physical blow. 3 generations of hard work, my husband's, my father-in-law's, mine, reduced to this. Daniel came running when he heard my cry. "Mom, what happened?" I pointed at the window, unable to speak. He clenched his fist so tightly his knuckles went white. "She's crossed the line," he muttered. "I'm going to her house. I'm going to..." I grabbed his arm before he could finish. "No, Daniel, that's what she wants. If you lose control, she wins." He stood there, breathing hard, trembling with rage. Then he turned and kicked the trash can, sending it clattering down the alley. That night, the bakery lights stayed off for the first time in years. I sat alone in the dark kitchen, surrounded by shelves of untouched cookies and candies, the sweet scent turning bitter in my nose. Around midnight, Daniel walked in quietly. He looked broken, his eyes hollow, his hands stuffed deep into his pockets. "Mom," he said, voice hoarse. "Maybe she's right. Maybe I should just give her half the business. She'll leave us alone." I turned to him slowly, disbelief surging through me. "You think paying her will stop her? She's tasted power, Daniel. She'll bleed you dry until there's nothing left." He dropped into a chair, burying his face in his hands. "Then what are we supposed to do? We can't fight her. She has money, lawyers, everything." I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to steady. "We fight her with truth. That's what she's afraid of." He looked up at me, exhausted and doubtful. Truth doesn't mean much when people already believe the lies. I reached across the table, placing my hand over his. "Then we'll make them see it anyway." The next morning, I called an old friend, Mr. Thompson, a retired attorney who'd helped my husband years ago. He was in his 70s now, but his voice over the phone was as sharp as ever. "Margaret Parker," he said. "Haven't heard that name in a while. What's going on?" I told him everything: the bridge, the custody threat, the online smear campaign. He listened quietly, not interrupting once. When I finished, there was a long pause. Finally, he said, "That woman's clever, I'll give her that. But clever doesn't mean untouchable." She picked at her salad, never once touching the pie. Daniel tried to keep the conversation light, asking about my garden, my neighbor, Mrs. Wilson's new dog, but his effort felt forced, like someone trying to glue together broken glass. When dinner was over, Vanessa stood abruptly. "I'll get Emily ready for bed. It's been a long day." "But it's only 8, I said softly, hoping she'd let the child stay a little longer. "She's tired," Vanessa replied, her tone cool and final. "I'll come by tomorrow." And he did, arriving in an old brown suit, briefcase in hand, eyes alert. With him was a young associate, Sarah Collins, sharp as a blade in a navy blazer. Sarah listened carefully as we laid everything out on the kitchen table, screenshots of fake reviews, the defaced storefront, the threatening calls. When we were done, she said simply, "We'll need to trace the source of these posts. If they're coming from the same IP address or a public cafe, We can tie them back to her. Mr. Thompson nodded. And we'll pull the divorce records. If Vanessa signed any settlements relinquishing her rights to Daniel's assets, that'll kill her claim to the bakery. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. But how long will that take? She's already destroying us. Sarah looked him in the eye. Then we move fast. Over the next few days, Mr. Thompson and Sarah worked like a storm. They contacted tech experts, dug into public records, and even found surveillance footage from a local internet cafe. And then 2 days later, they brought us proof. Look at this, Sarah said, sliding her laptop across the table. The screen showed Vanessa sitting at a computer, typing furiously. The timestamp matched the hour the first fake review had gone live. She's been orchestrating everything, Mr. Thompson said. Dozens of fake accounts, all connected to the same network. Huh. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. That monster. But Sarah wasn't done. We also traced the source of that video that went viral last night. My stomach dropped. What video? She clicked play. On the screen, a woman sat beside a hospital bed, crying into the camera. A child lay beside her, pale, hooked up to IV tubes. My son almost died after eating cookies from Sweet Haven Bakery, the woman sobbed. Please don't let them hurt anyone else. Oh. Beside the bed sat a box of our cookies, our logo perfectly visible. I felt my blood run cold. That's fake, I whispered. That has to be fake. Sarah nodded grimly. It is. We called every hospital in the area. No record of any food poisoning case like this. The woman in the video is an actress. We found her through social media. She's a friend of Vanessa's. Daniel slammed his hand on the table. She's framing us. We need to go to the police. Mr. Thompson raised a hand calmly. And we will. But we'll do it right. With evidence. And when we're done, she won't just lose her case. She'll lose everything. I sat back, overwhelmed by a mix of fear and fury. She's not even trying to take Emily out of love, I said softly. She just wants money. Control. Sarah met my gaze. Then let's take control back. That night, as Daniel tucked Emily into bed, I stood by the bakery window watching the moonlight glint off the rows of untouched pastries. My reflection looked older, wearier, but there was fire in my eyes again. Vanessa thought she could break us. She thought she could take my son, my granddaughter, my legacy, and turn them into weapons against me. But she'd made one mistake. She'd forgotten who she was dealing with. By the time dawn crept over Pasadena, I hadn't slept a wink. The entire house was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional rustle of Emily turning in her sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where I'd once watched Daniel eat cereal before school, now cluttered with folders, screenshots, and legal documents. My hands trembled as I ran my fingers over the papers. It still didn't seem real. My son had lost everything once because of that woman, and now she wanted to take what little piece we'd rebuilt. But this time, I wasn't the same Margaret Parker she'd fooled years ago. At exactly 8 o'clock, Mr. Thompson and Sarah arrived. The old lawyer carried his worn leather briefcase like a weapon, and Sarah had a tablet tucked under her arm, her heels clicking with confidence. Daniel was already there, standing by the window, staring out at the street. His shoulders were stiff, his jaw tight. When they entered, he turned, his face pale but determined. Let's do this. Mr. Thompson set his briefcase on the table and looked at us with that calm, measured stare of his. Before we file, I need you to understand something, he began. Vanessa's not stupid. She's vindictive. She'll twist every word, every memory to make you look like villains. But if you stand your ground, if you keep your tempers in check, the truth will destroy her. Daniel nodded slowly. We're ready. Sarah unfolded her tablet, showing us a list of exhibits, screenshots, messages, and surveillance stills from the cyber cafe where Vanessa had written the fake reviews. Daniel hesitated as they walked upstairs, glancing back at me with silent apology. That look was enough to tell me everything. My son was caught in a storm he couldn't control. When he came back down alone, I poured him a cup of tea. We sat in the living room, the clock ticking between us. Daniel, I began carefully, is everything okay? You've been distant lately. He stared at the floor for a long time. Mom, you've got to stop criticizing Vanessa. She feels like you don't respect her. Every one of these posts came from the same IP address, she explained. We also verified the fake hospital video. The woman in it is an actress from Los Angeles, named Melinda Cross. She's been paid twice by a company registered under Vanessa's cousin's name. Daniel clenched his fists. So we can prove it was all a setup. Sarah nodded. And with that, we'll charge her with defamation, fraud, and malicious interference with a family business. Mr. Thompson added, but there's one more thing. He slid a thin file toward me. I managed to get a copy of the divorce settlement from 3 years ago. My pulse quickened as I opened it. Inside was a typed document, brittle at the edges, stamped and notarized. The final page bore Vanessa's neat, elegant signature. Sarah pointed to a section highlighted in yellow. Here, in exchange for full transfer of shared assets, the undersigned agrees to waive all future claims to property or income belonging to Daniel Parker. My eyes widened. She signed away her rights? Exactly, Mr. Thompson said, a thin smile forming. That means her threats about owning half the bakery are empty. And once we expose the smear campaign, her custody case will crumble. I stared at the page, disbelief washing over me. Vanessa, so meticulous, so manipulative, had written her own downfall 3 years ago and never realized it. Sarah gathered the documents neatly. We'll file everything tomorrow morning. Once it's official, she'll receive a court summons. Until then, stay quiet. Don't post anything online. Don't react to the hate comments. Don't give her any new ammunition. I nodded, though a part of me still trembled. Vanessa had always been like a snake you could cut off the head, and somehow, it still found a way to strike. That night, I couldn't eat. I stood at the bakery window, looking out at the streetlights flickering against the glass. The shelves behind me were still full caramel squares, chocolate truffles, lemon tarts, but no customers came anymore. The sweet scent that once made me proud now felt like a ghost of what we'd lost. Daniel walked in quietly. He looked tired but calmer, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. Sarah says they'll serve her the papers in 2 days, he said softly. I nodded. Good. Maybe this time justice will finally come. He hesitated, then stepped closer. Mom, if it hadn't been for you, Emily and I would still be under that bridge. I don't think I ever said thank you. I looked up at him, startled. The boy I'd raised, the man I'd worried for, stood before me now with a humility that broke my heart. I reached out and touched his arm. You don't have to thank me, Daniel. You just have to live. He gave a faint, tired smile. I'll try. The following morning, Sarah and Mr. Thompson filed the lawsuit. Within 48 hours, Vanessa was served. I'll never forget the phone call that came after. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. Her voice was eerily calm, like a storm right before it breaks. Well played, Margaret, she said. Dragging lawyers into this. I didn't think you had it in you. I've had enough of your lies, I replied evenly. She laughed, low and cold. You think you can humiliate me and get away with it? You'll regret this, I promise. Then she hung up. I stood there for a long time, the phone still pressed against my ear, listening to the dial tone. The next few weeks were a blur of hearings, documents, and strategy meetings. I'd never set foot in a courtroom before, but when I walked in that day, my heart pounding against my ribs, I felt something strange, a sense of purpose. Vanessa sat across the aisle, dressed in a tailored navy suit, her hair immaculate. She smiled at the cameras outside, posing like an actress on the red carpet. Even now, she couldn't resist performing. But when she turned toward us, I caught something behind her smile, a flicker of fear. Sarah stood tall beside me, her voice crisp and steady as she presented our evidence. She played the cafe footage on a screen for the judge, Vanessa typing furiously at a computer, time-stamped exactly when the fake reviews had been posted. She displayed the financial transfers that traced the payments to Melinda Cross. Vanessa's lawyer tried to object, but Sarah countered every word with precision. Mr. Thompson watched silently, his fingers steepled, occasionally nodding with approval. And I frowned. I've never disrespected her. All I ever said was that she should spend more time with Emily. That's not criticism, that's concern. She says you told Mrs. Wilson she's lazy, that she wastes my money. I froze. My hands tightened around the teacup. What? Daniel, She heard it from Mrs. Wilson herself, he said, his voice rising. Why would you say something like that? I didn't, I protested. I just mentioned she seemed stressed lately. That's all. When Sarah finished, the courtroom was silent except for the soft shuffle of papers. The judge looked at Vanessa. Miss Reed, do you deny creating or authorizing this online activity? Vanessa shifted in her seat. I don't recall. Sarah cut in smoothly. Would you like us to replay the footage, Your Honor? Vanessa's jaw clenched. Her attorney whispered frantically in her ear, but she didn't answer. The silence was enough. Then came the final blow. Mr. Thompson presented the divorce document, the same one she'd signed years ago. He read the clause aloud, his voice firm, echoing through the courtroom. The undersigned agrees to waive all future claims to property or income belonging to Daniel Parker. You could have heard a pin drop. The judge leaned back, eyes narrowing. Miss Reed, is that your signature? Vanessa hesitated, then nodded stiffly. Then you have no legal grounds to pursue any ownership of Sweet Haven Bakery, the judge concluded, nor do you have a basis for damages. Daniel let out a shaky breath beside me, relief flooding his face. I gripped his hand tightly, tears burning my eyes. But I knew Vanessa wasn't done, not yet. As we left the courthouse, she followed us outside, her heels clacking like gunshots against the pavement. Don't celebrate too soon, she hissed. You might have won this round, but I'm not finished. I turned to her slowly, meeting her cold gaze head on. You should stop before you lose what little you have left, Vanessa. She smiled, a smile so brittle it could have cracked. Oh, Margaret, I already lost everything once. I have nothing left to lose. And in her eyes I saw it, the madness of a cornered woman. That night, back at home, Emily sat on the couch drawing as Daniel cleaned up the bakery's front room. For the first time in months, laughter echoed softly through the house. But even as I watched them, a chill ran down my spine. People like Vanessa didn't vanish quietly. They lashed out. I stood by the window, looking at the faint reflection of my family behind me, the son I'd saved, the granddaughter I adored, and I whispered to myself, come for me if you must, Vanessa. But if you do, I'll be ready. I'm staying. For a brief while after the trial, peace returned, fragile, like the first layer of ice over a lake. Customers began to trickle back into Sweet Haven, cautious at first, then loyal again once word spread that the rumors had been fake. Daniel smiled more often. Emily sang as she helped me frost cupcakes. I'd catch her little voice humming while sunlight poured through the windows, and for the first time in years, the air felt warm again. But I knew better than to believe in peace where Vanessa was concerned. People like her didn't retreat. They recalculated. It started subtly, unfamiliar cars parked across the street, camera flashes at odd hours, a strange man pretending to be a food inspector who never showed credentials. Then one morning, as I walked into the bakery, I noticed the door slightly ajar. Inside, the air smelled wrong, metallic, sharp, tainted. My heart pounded as I stepped forward. The glass cases were smashed. Bags of flour were slit open, spilling like blood onto the floor. And on the counter, written in red paint, were two words that made my stomach twist. You lost. I called the police immediately. Daniel rushed in minutes later, his face pale, fury in his eyes. It was her. It has to be her. I nodded, though my voice trembled. I know. The officers dusted for fingerprints, but everything had been wiped clean. Still, they found security footage from the shop next door, a shadowy figure in a hoodie, tall, slender, walking with that same deliberate grace I'd seen too many times before. Vanessa. The detective promised to investigate, but I didn't wait. I'd lived too long in fear of that woman. It was time to end this for good. The next day, I drove to Los Angeles. Mr. Thompson had found a private investigator named Ethan Cole, a quiet, methodical man who didn't waste words. His office smelled faintly of coffee and rain. He studied the photos I'd brought, the vandalized shop, the threatening words, and nodded once. I'll find her, he said simply. 2 days later, he called. She's staying at the Marbury Hotel downtown, room 614, registered under a fake name, but the credit card ties to an old Australian account hers. I thanked him, then sat in silence for a long time.